The morning air sliced sharp across the mountain base, carrying the cold scent of metal and gun oil. A whistle cut through the noise, commanding bodies into formation. And then, out of the fog, she appeared. Sarah Quinn stepped from the rusted transport truck like a shadow slipping into daylight. Her jacket was torn at the cuff, her boots mud-caked from 100 forgotten roads, her silence louder than any command. Around her, rows of recruits straightened and stared. Someone snorted. Another laughed. The sound spread fast, mockery dressed as entertainment. "She lost? Looks like supply chain sent the wrong shipment," muttered Cade Mercer, broad-shouldered, perfect uniform pressed into lines of authority he hadn't earned. His grin carried the kind of confidence that had never been tested. Sarah didn't look up. She adjusted the strap of her worn pack, eyes fixed on the cracked pavement, and walked past him. The laughter sharpened. "She even walks like a ghost," said Ryland Shaw, voice dripping with disdain. "Maybe she's here to clean rifles, not fire them." But Sarah's steps never faltered. Not once. At the head of the courtyard, Commander Hal Rowan, gray eyes, posture carved from discipline, watched her approach. Something flickered in his gaze, something he buried under routine. He barked an order, snapping the group to silence. "Formation Bravo, now!" Boots slammed into alignment. The air held tension like a wire stretched too tight. Sarah joined the line without a word, the weight of stairs pressing down like storm clouds. Hal stalked past the row, stopping before her. "Name?" "Sarah Quinn." "Background?" "Civilian logistics." Her voice was calm, even, devoid of apology. The corner of his mouth twitched. "You're in the wrong program." "No, sir." A low chuckle rippled through the recruits. Hal didn't smile. He stepped back, eyes narrowing as if trying to read a hidden text beneath her silence. "Then prove you belong here," he said. "We start with endurance." The whistle shrieked. Bodies launched forward across the uneven terrain, lungs burning, boots slamming into dirt. Sarah moved with the rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times alone. Her breath was steady, her face blank. Behind her, Ryland muttered curses as his stride faltered. By the second mile, Cade surged ahead, glancing back to throw her a smirk. "Keep up, Ghost." She said nothing. At mile 4, the ground turned slick with rain-soaked clay. One misstep sent Ryland sprawling, splattering mud across Sarah's boots. He cursed, shoved himself up, and spat toward her. "Watch where you're going." But it wasn't her fault, and she didn't reply. She only tightened her laces and kept running. When the whistle finally blew, Cade bent double, hands on knees, sweat streaking down his face. Sarah remained upright, breathing slow, eyes distant, as if listening for something only she could hear. Hal's voice cut through the panting silence. "Observation drills. 10 minutes." The recruits broke formation, muttering. Sarah moved to the edge of the training yard, crouched, and tied a fresh knot into the fraying strap of her pack. Fingers precise, purposeful. A small act, but one Hal noticed. Cade swaggered over, tossing a canteen into the dirt near her feet. "You don't talk much, do you? What, too good for the rest of us?" Sarah looked up, eyes unreadable. "No," she said softly. "Just careful who I talk to." His grin faltered, replaced by something colder. "You'll wash out before the week's over." She rose slowly, standing level with him despite his height. "Maybe." A voice from across the yard broke the moment. "Quinn, gear check." She turned and walked away, leaving him staring after her, irritation gnawing at his certainty. Later, inside the mess hall, the room hummed with noise, clattering trays, forced laughter, bragging about drills. Sarah carried her food to a corner table, alone. Conversations dimmed just enough to mark her presence. At the next table, a recruit named Mara Finn leaned toward Cade, whispering behind her hand. "You think she's hiding something?" Cade snorted. "Yeah, probably fear." But Mara's eyes stayed fixed on Sarah. "Or something else." Outside, storm clouds gathered, pressing gray light against the windows, the kind that made the air feel heavy with prediction. When the night exercise began, the recruits stumbled through low light and shouted orders, their nerves fraying with each siren blast. Sarah moved quietly through the chaos, her body knowing when to duck, when to hold breath, when to move. While others scrambled, she seemed to anticipate the rhythm of confusion. By the end of the drill, when scores flashed across the holoboard, her name sat near the top, untrained, untested, yet somehow perfect. Cade cursed under his breath. Ryland slammed his fist against a locker. "She's cheating." Hal said nothing, only studying her through the crowd. That calm precision, that restraint. He'd seen it once before, years ago, in a place buried under classified files. Later, as the recruits filed into barracks, Sarah lingered outside under the weak glow of a security lamp. She pulled a photograph from her pocket, a blurred figure in a black coat, face obscured by shadow. Her thumb traced the edge where the image had burned, the ghost of a life erased. A shout broke the quiet. Cade again, swagger heavy, anger louder than courage. "You think being quiet makes you strong? It just makes you forgettable." Sarah slid the photo away and met his gaze. "Maybe that's the point." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The hum of the floodlight buzzed between them, harsh and electric. Then the door behind them opened. Commander Hal stood framed in the light, watching. His eyes held questions he didn't yet ask. Sarah turned, walked past him, and disappeared into the shadows of the barracks. Hal remained, looking out over the silent yard, his breath misting in the cold. Something about her didn't fit. Not the way she moved, not the silence she wore like armor. He'd seen that kind of quiet once, before everything went wrong. Inside, Sarah lay on the narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling as the others whispered about her in the dark. She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. In her mind, a voice from long ago echoed like a ghost. "Hide your strength. Wait for the right eyes to see it." Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, low and distant, like warning. The storm would break soon, and when it did, nothing in this place would remain the same. Dawn bled pale over the ridge, turning the base into a world of steel and frost. The recruits lined up in silence, breath hanging like ghosts. Commander Hal Rowan paced the row with a clipboard in hand, the morning wind pressing his coat against the lean frame of a man who had seen too much and forgotten too little. Today was assessment day. Sarah Quinn stood at the end of the line, hands clasped behind her back, expression unreadable. Her uniform still bore the marks of wear, a frayed collar, a patch sewn crooked at the shoulder, and though others smirked, she didn't adjust it. Let them see what they wanted. That was the point. Hal's voice cracked across the cold air. "You're here to be broken, to be measured, and to decide who stays when the weak fall." The first test began with endurance, a sprint through obstacle courses carved into jagged terrain. Mud, wire, walls slick with frost. Cade Mercer shot forward like a bullet, jaw tight with the need to win. Ryland Shaw stumbled at the first barrier, cursing under his breath. Sarah ran steady, no wasted motion, no bursts of bravado. Her breathing was measured, rhythm sure, eyes scanning the path ahead rather than the competitors. Halfway through, a tripwire sent Ryland tumbling face first into the mud. He spat, snarled, and when Sarah passed him, he muttered, "Don't you dare look at me." She didn't. Cade finished first, collapsing into a grin soaked with pride. When Sarah crossed moments later, not first, not last, but precise, Cade's grin faltered. "Middle of the pack, he said, loud enough for the others. Guess Mystery Girl's just average. But Hal's eyes lingered on her score longer than the others. Her times were exact. Every obstacle executed with clockwork precision. No mistakes, no hesitation. Not average. Controlled. The second drill began inside the weapons hangar, where metal clanked and oil stung the air. Each recruit was handed a rifle, disassembled into pieces across the table. The timer flashed red. 90 seconds. Rylan fumbled with pins, swore when one rolled off the edge. Cade worked fast but sloppy, scraping metal against metal. Sarah's hands moved like memory. No wasted motion, no pause. Pins locked, bolt clicked, chamber checked, trigger guard seated. When the timer sounded, she stepped back first, weapon assembled, flawless. Hal said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Across the room, whispers rippled. Cade stared at her rifle, then at his own crooked assembly. You've done this before. Sarah wiped a smear of grease from her wrist. Everyone here has. Not like that. His voice was quieter now, more question than accusation. She didn't answer, just set the rifle down with care, like it mattered. The afternoon brought combat drills, hand to hand, no weapons, just instinct. The recruits paired off, laughter sharp as blades. Sarah ended up across from Mara Finn, lean and restless, with something to prove. At the whistle, Mara lunged, quick and wild. Sarah sidestepped, grip gentle but sure, redirecting the strike rather than blocking it. Mara stumbled, frustration flaring. "Fight back," she hissed. Sarah shook her head. "It's not about fighting." Mara came again, faster, angrier. Sarah caught her wrist, turned it just enough to unbalance her, and let her fall softly to the mat. No pain, just inevitability. Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then Mara pushed herself up, eyes narrowed, no longer mocking. "Where'd you learn that?" Sarah met her gaze. "Somewhere that doesn't exist anymore." The line unsettled Mara more than any throw. By evening, the barracks hummed with restless talk. Cade sprawled on his bunk, tossing a ball between his hands. "She's hiding something," he said. "Nobody moves like that by accident." Rylan scoffed. "Maybe she's special forces, deep cover, or maybe she's just lucky." Cade caught the ball mid-air, eyes cold. "Luck doesn't make you invisible." Across the room, Sarah sat alone on her bunk, laces untied, fingers tracing the edge of her boot like she was counting seconds. Her eyes were fixed not on the wall, but beyond it, somewhere far away, where ghosts walked through memory. Hal's footsteps echoed down the corridor. He paused at the door, scanning the room. Tomorrow, precision drills, no excuses. When he turned away, his gaze brushed Sarah's for the briefest second. Something passed between them, a flicker of curiosity, maybe recognition, buried deep. She looked down before he could ask the questions he didn't yet know how to shape. The lights dimmed, the bass quieted, save for the distant rumble of generators. Sarah lay awake, eyes open to the dark, the hum of silence pressing in. Sleep never came easy, not since the night everything burned. In the morning, the sky was the color of ash. The recruits assembled at the shooting range, rifles gleaming under misted light. The test was simple: 5 shots, 5 targets. Perfect accuracy or immediate dismissal. One by one they fired. Shots rang out, some clean, some wide. Cade hit 4, cursed at the 5th. Rylan hit 3, slammed his rifle down. Mara missed only 1, breathing hard. When Sarah stepped to the line, whispers rippled down the row. She took no test shots, adjusted no sights, just lifted the weapon, shoulders relaxed, eyes calm. Each breath measured, each pull silent. 5 shots cracked through the fog. When the smoke cleared, every target bore a single hole, centered, almost surgical. The instructor blinked. "Perfect," he said quietly. Cade's jaw clenched. Rylan muttered something about impossible angles. But Hal didn't speak. He stepped closer, inspecting the rifle. The sight was off by half a degree, enough to ruin anyone's aim. He looked at her. She said nothing. The others drifted away, muttering, eyes flicking toward her and back. For the first time, the laughter had faded. What replaced it was heavier, uneasy. Sarah slung the rifle over her shoulder, walked past Cade, who reached out, blocking her path. "Who are you?" he asked. Her eyes lifted to meet his, calm, tired, dangerous. "No one," she said, and stepped around him. Hal watched from the distance, the name on his clipboard blurring under his grip. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a memory stirred, a face from an operation erased from records, a mark burned into his memory. He needed answers. But Sarah Quinn was already walking away, boots crunching against the gravel, wind pulling at her jacket, the weight of secrets steady on her back. The question would wait. The storm would not. The sky pressed low over the base, bruised and heavy with rain. Wind rattled the steel siding of the barracks, carrying with it the cold bite of another trial day. Sarah Quinn stood alone in the yard, jacket zipped high, breath steady. Around her, recruits gathered in clusters, their voices sharp, charged with something close to fear disguised as ridicule. Cade Mercer leaned against a post, arms folded, eyes fixed on her with a mixture of resentment and curiosity. "Perfect shots. Perfect drills. You're not fooling anyone, Quinn." Sarah didn't answer. The silence was deliberate, measured like everything she did. But silence in places like this had a way of turning into provocation. Rylan Shaw kicked at the dirt. "She's hiding something. Nobody just walks in here and outperforms people who've trained for years." "Then we'll make her talk," Cade said, pushing off the post. His voice carried across the yard, cutting through the wind. "You think you're special, Quinn? You think that quiet makes you invisible?" Sarah met his stare, unblinking. "No. It just keeps me from saying things I'll regret." A laugh rippled through the group, uneasy. Cade stepped closer, his boots grinding gravel. "How about you show us who you really are?" Commander Hal Rowan's voice sliced through the tension. "Enough!" The recruits froze. Hal's gaze swept over them, cool and unreadable. "If you have questions about who belongs here, you'll find your answers in the field." He pointed toward the ridge. "Navigation exercise. 2 hours. Alone. Bring back your markers." The group scattered for maps and compasses, grumbling. Sarah adjusted the strap on her pack, checked her bearings, and slipped into the trees before the others had even finished arguing. The forest swallowed sound. Branches dripped from the morning storm, the air thick with pine and wet soil. Sarah moved like shadow, steps silent, eyes scanning the terrain, marking each ridge and hollow with instinct born of something older than training. Half an hour in, she reached the river crossing. The current was fast, the rocks slick with moss. She crouched, gauging depth, reading flow like a language. Behind her, branches snapped. Cade emerged from the trees with Rylan close behind, both breathing hard. "Didn't know this was a group assignment," she said. "Consider it teamwork," Cade replied. His grin didn't reach his eyes. Rylan held up her map, torn clean through. "Found this," he said. "Guess you're lost now." Sarah's face stayed still. "Maps are only useful if you can read them." Cade stepped closer. "So read this one." He dropped his own map into the river. The paper swirled once before vanishing downstream. They expected anger, panic. They got neither. Sarah adjusted the strap of her bag, glanced toward the tree line, and said quietly, "You just made your problem worse." Then she turned, moving uphill, leaving them behind in confusion that tasted like shame. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridge, Sarah had placed every marker, her pace unbroken. When she returned to base, mud streaked her boots, but her face was calm, her eyes distant. Cade and Ryland stumbled in an hour later, empty-handed, soaked, and furious. Hal marked their scores without a word, but when his pen hovered over Sarah's sheet, his hand hesitated. Her routes were perfect, down to the meter. Not luck, not chance. That night, in the mess hall, whispers followed her like shadows. How'd she find her way back? She must have cheated. Nobody's that good. Sarah sat alone, a bowl of soup cooling untouched. The noise pressed around her, heavy and accusing. Across the room, Mara Finn hesitated before walking over. She set a folded cloth on the table. "For your boots," Mara said. "They're tearing." Sarah looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. "Thank you." Mara shifted awkwardly. "You don't talk much." "Talking never changed anything," Sarah said. Her voice carried a softness edged with memory. Mara wanted to ask what she meant, but the look in Sarah's eyes, distant, guarded, told her not to. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling windows. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder rolled. Later, in the barracks, Cade dropped onto his bunk, scowling. "She's making us look weak." Ryland pulled off his boots, grimacing. "Maybe she is strong." Cade glared. "No one's that strong without a reason." Across the room, Sarah cleaned her gear in silence. Her hands were steady, movements automatic, but her thoughts drifted back to a different place. A concrete corridor lit by flickering bulbs, the echo of boots behind her, the voice that had once said, "They'll never see you coming. That's your power." She'd buried that life. But the base was stirring ghosts she thought long dead. Near midnight, Hal stood in his office reviewing reports. The flicker of the desk lamp cast long shadows across classified folders. He paused over one name, Sarah Quinn. Background, thin, too thin. No prior training listed, no verifiable records before 2 years ago. Yet her skill set read like a soldier built in silence. He exhaled, fingers drumming on the desk. Somewhere, someone had erased her past. The question was why. A knock pulled him from thought. Mara stood at the door, hesitant. "Sir, there's something about Quinn." Hal motioned her in. She spoke quietly, recounting the drills, the silence, the precision. "She doesn't act like the others. It's like she's waiting." "For what?" Hal asked. Mara shook her head. "I don't think she even knows." When she left, Hal turned to the window. Outside, the training yard glowed faintly under floodlights. In the distance, a single figure stood alone, unmoving. Sarah, staring out toward the dark ridge beyond the perimeter. He should have called her in, should have asked the questions. But something in that stillness stopped him. Down in the yard, Sarah lifted her gaze to the horizon, where clouds built like a wall. She could feel it. The shift in the air, the tightening thread pulling her toward a truth she didn't want to face. Her fingers brushed the inside of her jacket, where a small patch of cloth lay hidden, stitched with a black symbol faded by time. She hadn't touched it in years. Now it felt warm against her skin. Behind her, footsteps crunched in the gravel. She turned, expecting Hal, but found Cade instead. His face was half in shadow. "I know what you're doing," he said. Sarah tilted her head. "Do you?" He stepped closer, voice low. "You think you can stay invisible. But people like you always get exposed." She studied him for a moment, eyes calm. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe that's what they want you to believe." He frowned, caught off guard by the quiet certainty in her tone. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and something older, metal, smoke, memory. Sarah looked past him toward the hills, where lightning split the horizon. She knew then, The past she'd buried wasn't done with her. And when it came back, it wouldn't knock. Rain hammered the training field, flattening the grass into slick ribbons. Recruits lined up under the downpour, water streaming from their helmets, their breath fogging in the cold. The storm hadn't delayed the schedule. It never did. Commander Hal Rowan's voice carried through the roar. Combat evaluations. No weapons. No mercy. Real skill doesn't rust in the rain. Pairs stepped into the center one after another, their grunts and impacts lost to thunder. The line thinned until only a few remained. Then Hal called a name that made every head turn. Quinn? Mercer? Sarah stepped forward, boots squelching in the mud. Cade rolled his shoulders, jaw set tight, rain slicking across his face. He'd waited for this, his chance to break the mystery open, to prove she wasn't untouchable. They faced each other in the circle, water dripping from their hair. Hal gave a single nod. Begin. Cade moved first, a blur of muscle and anger. His fist sliced through rain toward her jaw. Sarah shifted just enough, barely a breath, and the punch met empty air. Cade followed with a knee, a hook, a shove meant to overwhelm. She slipped past each strike, her body flowing with eerie precision. No counterattack, no aggression, just quiet control. Frustration twisted Cade's face. He grabbed her collar, wrenching her close, shouting over the storm. Stop hiding! The fabric tore. The sound cracked louder than thunder. Sarah froze. So did everyone else. The shredded collar fell away from her shoulder, revealing dark ink pressed against pale skin, a coiled serpent wrapped around a broken blade. The lines were sharp, exact, alive even under the rain. Cade staggered back. What? What is that? Hal's breath caught. His heart slammed against his ribs. The mark. He'd seen it once, on a mission that didn't exist, in a file burned before it could be archived. It belonged to a unit erased from every record, a unit that trained ghosts. The field fell silent. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Sarah straightened, the torn fabric hanging loose. Her eyes met Hal's across the circle, and in them he saw the truth she'd tried so hard to bury. Cade's voice shook. You're one of them. Sarah didn't deny it. Hal stepped forward slowly, boots sinking into mud. The recruits parted around him, uneasy, unsure. He stopped a few feet away, staring at the mark like it might vanish if he blinked. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. Sarah's voice was steady, but it carried something older than defiance. I didn't get it. I earned it. A whisper rippled through the line. Fear, reverence, disbelief. Cade's bravado cracked. That unit's gone. Everyone knows that. Sarah looked past him, into the gray distance. Not everyone. Hal swallowed hard. The stories had been legend. A covert program training operatives beyond conventional command, soldiers who could infiltrate anywhere, adapt to anything, disappear without trace. But the program had vanished after a mission gone wrong, classified, condemned, buried. And yet here she stood, living proof of a ghost that refused to die. Hal's voice lowered. You were Ghostblade. Sarah didn't blink. No one was Ghostblade. We were shadows, and shadows don't have names. The recruits shifted, whispers turning to uneasy silence. Rain coursed down their faces, mingling with disbelief. Cade stepped forward again, voice breaking. If you're so special, why are you here? Playing recruit? Sarah met his gaze with quiet fire. Because the world remembers the loud and forgets the dangerous. And sometimes, silence is the only way to survive. Hal exhaled slowly, realization dawning like lightning. This wasn't arrogance or secrecy. It was exile. A soldier erased to protect what she once served. He turned to the recruits. "Stand down." No one moved. So he did something no one expected. He straightened, heels together, and raised his hand in a crisp salute. Every breath froze. Cade's jaw fell open. Rylan blinked in confusion. Mara's eyes widened, understanding before the others. Sarah stared at Hal, rain streaking across her face. She didn't return the salute, just lowered her gaze, as if the gesture carried a weight she wasn't ready to bear. Hal's voice was low, but it carried across the field. "You don't salute ghosts unless they've earned it." The silence that followed was heavier than any command. Then Sarah stepped back, pulled the torn collar over her shoulder, and turned toward the barracks without a word. No one stopped her. They simply watched as she walked through the storm, the mark still visible like a scar of truth. When the door shut behind her, the whispers started again, but softer now, tinged with awe instead of mockery. Inside the barracks, Sarah sat on the edge of her bunk, rainwater pooling at her feet. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the ache of being seen. The life she'd buried was clawing its way back through the cracks. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, sealed packet. Inside, a photograph, edges worn, faces blurred by time. A team in unmarked uniforms. One figure at the center, taller, eyes shadowed, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Her mentor. The one who'd taught her silence could be a weapon. The one who'd never come back from the last mission. Her thumb brushed the image, tracing the outline of the broken blade stitched on his sleeve. The same mark now burned into her skin. A knock broke the quiet. She slipped the photo away. "Come in." The door opened. Mara stepped inside, hesitating. "They're all talking." "I know. They're scared. They should be." Mara frowned. "Are you?" Sarah's eyes lifted, calm and unreadable. "No, but the truth never stays buried. And some ghosts don't like being forgotten." Mara didn't understand. Not yet. But something in Sarah's tone sent a chill crawling up her spine. Outside, thunder cracked over the ridge, a single flash splitting the horizon. Sarah stood, shoulders squared. The storm had broken. The past was awake now, and it was coming. Mara watched her in silence, sensing the shift, the way the air itself seemed to tighten around her. "What happens now?" she asked. Sarah looked toward the door, where wind rattled against the frame like an impatient hand. "Now," she said softly, "we stop pretending." The light flickered. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to pulse, a low, rising hum that promised change. The recruits in the yard froze, listening. Inside, Sarah closed her eyes for a heartbeat. It had begun. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered. The base woke under gray skies and hushed voices. In the mess hall, trays clattered softer, laughter died quicker. Eyes darted toward Sarah Quinn, then away again, as if staring too long might draw danger closer. She sat alone, hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. The sleeve of her uniform had been mended, the torn fabric stitched neat, but the mark beneath remained, known now, impossible to forget. Cade Mercer entered late, boots heavy, jaw tight. He hesitated near her table, the usual smirk absent. The silence between them held more weight than any insult. He wanted to speak. Apology, challenge, he didn't know. But she never looked up. Her stillness held him at bay. Across the hall, Commander Hal Rowan stood with arms crossed, watching. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes tracked every flicker of movement. Respect. Caution. Something deeper. He'd saluted her yesterday, and now the base followed his lead without knowing why. At briefing, Hal's voice was sharper than usual. You all saw what happened. You all think you understand it. You don't. He paced the line, boots striking the concrete with steady rhythm. That mark doesn't grant authority. It reveals it. Quinn isn't your rival. She's the standard. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Rylan shifted, eyes down. Mara stood straighter. Cade's hands clenched behind his back. Hal stopped in front of Sarah. From this moment, she'll serve as acting instructor. Observe her, learn from her, or leave. The words landed like a verdict. Some faces hardened with resentment, others with awe. Sarah didn't move. She hadn't asked for this. She didn't want it. But refusal wasn't an option now. After dismissal, Mara approached her in the corridor. You should say something. To who? To them. They don't know what to do with you. Sarah's gaze flicked toward the others filing out. They don't have to. But you're leading now, whether you want it or not. Sarah turned away, voice quiet. Leadership isn't given. It's tested. Outside, the training yard gleamed wet from rain. The air carried the metallic scent of spent storms. Recruits gathered for the live fire exercise, nerves visible in twitching hands and stiff jaws. Sarah walked the line, checking rifles with quick, practiced motions. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but absolute. Check wind. Adjust for drift. Breathe before you aim. Control doesn't come from force. It comes from patience. Cade watched her, uneasy. He'd mocked that calm once. Now it unsettled him more than any shout. When his shot veered wide, Sarah stepped beside him, adjusted the scope by a fraction, said nothing. On the next shot, the bullet struck dead center. He looked at her, half grateful, half proud, unsure which emotion to trust. She'd changed the field without ever raising her voice. By midday, the exercise ended. Scores climbed. Mistakes dropped. Hal took notes from the observation deck, his expression guarded but impressed. He'd seen instructors with louder tempers, flashier techniques, but none who bent the air around them the way Sarah did, with silence sharp as glass. That afternoon, Cade found her near the storage shed, cleaning her rifle. He hesitated, then said, You didn't have to help me. Sarah didn't glance up. I don't help. I teach. Same thing. No. Helping makes you weaker. Teaching makes you dangerous. He frowned. Why hide what you are? She slid the bolt into place, the sound crisp. Because people don't listen until they've judged you first. Cade leaned against the wall, rain dripping from the eaves above. And now? She looked at him finally, eyes tired but steady. Now they listen for the wrong reasons. Before he could answer, alarms blared across the base, sharp, rhythmic, urgent. Recruits scattered toward stations, the air thick with confusion. Hal's voice roared over the comms. Drill alert! Perimeter breach simulation! Report positions! Sarah moved before orders finished. Instinct. Training older than this base. She reached the outer line first, scanning the tree line as floodlights snapped on. Figures in dark fatigues broke through the fog. Mock intruders for the test, but something about their formation felt wrong. Too precise. Too familiar. The simulation began, but her pulse told her this wasn't just a drill. She barked commands, voice cutting through chaos. Left flank, stay low. Right, cover crossfire. Don't bunch. Move on my signal. The recruits obeyed without hesitation. Bullets cracked through the air, blanks, but the discipline was real. Sarah shifted position with surgical control, anticipating every feint, every trap. Within minutes, the field was secure. Hal arrived at the tail end, breath fogging in the cold. You took command. Sarah's reply was calm. Someone had to. He nodded once. No rebuke, no surprise. When the alarm cleared, the recruit stood in stunned silence. Even Cade looked at her with reluctant admiration. Later, in Hal's office, rain tapped against the windows. He leaned on the desk, studying her across the dim room. "You've led before." Sarah didn't deny it. He exhaled. "The mark. Ghost Blade. You were part of the last mission, weren't you? The one that vanished." Her eyes shifted, shadowed. "I was the one who came back." Hal straightened, the weight of those words settling like lead. "And now?" "Now I'm trying to remember what it means to belong somewhere again." He didn't answer. There were no regulations for ghosts seeking redemption. When she left his office, the hallway lights flickered, dimming for a heartbeat. She paused, senses alert. The hum of the bass carried a subtle undertone, an encrypted signal pulsing through comm lines. She recognized the pattern instantly. A code. From a network that shouldn't exist anymore. Back in her quarters, she powered her old field device from a hidden compartment. The screen flared to life, static bleeding into a single phrase. Operation Echo reinstated. Contact in 48 hours. Her throat tightened. That call sign belonged to her mentor, the one presumed dead. She stared at the words until the light faded. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and iron. Somewhere beyond the perimeter, the past was moving again. Sarah closed the device, slipped it into her pocket, and looked toward the door where shadows stretched long across the floor. She'd spent years trying to disappear. Now the world was coming to find her. Night cloaked the base in silence. Floodlights cut thin slices through the mist, carving shapes out of shadow. Inside her quarters, Sarah Quinn sat cross-legged on the floor, the glow of the old field device painting her face in cold light. The message still blinked on the cracked screen. Operation Echo reinstated. Contact in 48 hours. The letters pulsed like a heartbeat. Familiar. Unwanted. She shut the device, fingers trembling only after it was dark. Around her, the room was still, bunk neatly made, gear packed with precision. It looked less like a home and more like a staging ground. Maybe that was all she'd ever built. A soft knock. "Quinn?" It was Mara Finn, hesitant. Sarah rose, opening the door just enough for light to spill across the corridor. "Can't sleep," Mara said, voice quiet. "Feels different tonight." Sarah studied her, noting the restless eyes, the way she gripped the hem of her sleeve, fear hiding behind curiosity. "Storms leave echoes," Sarah said. Mara frowned. "You think it's over?" Sarah didn't answer. She stepped aside, letting her in. Mara's gaze fell on the deactivated device on the table. "What's that?" Sarah slid it into her bag. "Old habits. From before?" Sarah's silence was its own answer. Mara lowered her voice. "Was it real? Ghost Blade?" Sarah leaned against the wall, eyes unfocused. "It wasn't a name. It was a shadow. A mission built on silence. We went where others couldn't, did what others wouldn't. And when it ended, they erased us. All of us." Mara swallowed. "But you survived. Not by choice." Her voice was softer now, tinged with a weariness too deep to hide. "The last mission, Operation Echo, we were sent to extract a target no one would name. It went wrong. I lost everyone. The report said the unit was destroyed. Easier that way. And now they're calling you back." Sarah nodded once, slow. "Which means the past isn't done." Outside, wind rattled the barracks windows. Somewhere in the dark, a sensor light flickered on, then off again. Mara shifted. Uneasy. "What will you do?" Sarah's gaze turned distant, cold. What I was trained for. In the morning, the base carried a hum of tension, like static in the air before lightning. Hal Rowan felt it too, the way conversations stopped when he entered, the way recruits moved faster, sharper, sensing the change. He found Sarah in the yard, already training before dawn, hands bare against the cold metal of the pull-up bar. Her breath came steady, controlled. He waited until she dropped lightly to the ground. "You don't rest," he said. "Rest is luxury," she replied. "I can't afford it." Hal studied her, seeing now what he'd missed before, the way she scanned every angle of space, the way her stance never relaxed fully. A soldier in exile, always waiting for the next mission. "Talk to me," he said. "Who are you waiting for?" She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, he saw the flicker of the truth she'd buried. Someone who never came back. Ghostblade? Sarah shook her head. The man who trained him. My mentor. Call sign Revenant. He led the final operation. We were ambushed. Communications cut. Extraction failed. When I woke, the field was ash. Hal folded his arms. You think he's alive? I think someone wants me to believe he is. He hesitated. And if it's true? Her jaw tightened. Then the world isn't as finished as it pretends to be. They stood in silence, the morning wind carrying the faint echo of alarms from distant training grounds. Hal wanted to ask more, but something in her posture told him the conversation was over. That afternoon, during weapons calibration, Cade Mercer approached her. His tone lacked mockery now, replaced by grudging respect. You've been different since that message came through. Sarah's hands paused mid-motion. You've been watching. Hard not to. You move like you're already somewhere else. She gave a thin, humorless smile. Maybe I am. He leaned closer, voice low. If something's coming, tell us. We deserve to know. Sarah shook her head. No one deserves what's coming. Cade stared at her, trying to read the meaning buried under the words, but she'd already turned away, reassembling the rifle with mechanical calm. That night, sleep came in fragments. Sarah dreamed of the final mission, the smell of burning sand, the crack of suppressed gunfire, the shadow of her mentor's silhouette framed by firelight. His voice echoed through the smoke. If you're left behind, you stay hidden. The mission doesn't die with the team. It waits. She woke with a start. Sweat cold on her skin, the dream fading but the words burning bright. She rose, pulling on her boots, and stepped into the corridor. The base was quiet, save for the low hum of generators. Outside, the air was thick with mist. She walked the perimeter alone, tracing the fence line, the floodlights painting her shadow long across the ground. At the northern gate, she found Hal waiting, as if he'd known she'd come. He held a folder in his hand, edges worn, stamped with clearance codes long retired. I dug deeper, he said, into Ghostblade, into Operation Echo. Everything's scrubbed, no logs, no records. But there's chatter in the intel channels. A signature pinged off the old encryption grid 2 nights ago. Sarah's breath caught. Revenant. Hal nodded. Or someone using his name. The fog thickened, wrapping the base in gray silence. Sarah stared into it, pulse steady, eyes hardening. Then I have 48 hours to find out which. Hal hesitated. You'll leave? I was never meant to stay. You've built something here, he said. These recruits, they look at you differently now. You could lead. Sarah shook her head. You can't lead shadows. You can only follow them until they fade. She turned to go, but Hal stepped forward. If you go back into that world, you may not return. Sarah's expression softened just slightly. I never really came back. When she reached her quarters, the field device blinked again. New coordinates. No name. No sender. Just a time and a place buried deep in the mountains north of the base. She stared at the screen, feeling the weight of old ghosts pressing close. The mission wasn't over. It had just been waiting for her to remember. She powered the device down, slipped it into her jacket, and looked once more at the folded photograph in her bag. The faces blurred by age, the man in the center half smiling like he knew this day would come. Sarah exhaled slowly, the decision already made. Outside, dawn crept over the horizon, painting the fog in pale gold. The base still slept, but the past was awake and calling her home. The mountains loomed beyond the wire, their slopes cloaked in fog thick as smoke. The coordinates from the ghost signal pulsed in Sarah's memory like a heartbeat she couldn't silence. North Ridge, 0400 hours, 48 hours left. Maybe less. But first came the simulation, the final assessment before new assignments. Commander Hal Rowan had scheduled it days ago. He hadn't canceled it, though both knew this wasn't just a test for the recruits. It was for her. The briefing room buzzed with low tension. Maps glowed across the hollow board, showing a mock urban grid carved into the valley below. Objective: infiltrate, retrieve intel, exfiltrate unseen. Failure meant disqualification. Success meant survival. Hal's gaze swept the room. You'll operate in squads of 4. Sarah Quinn will lead Alpha. Whispers rippled. Some eyes narrowed, others widened. Cade Mercer's brow furrowed, but he stepped forward, jaw set. Mara Finn followed without hesitation. 2 others joined, wary but silent. Sarah studied them, faces half-lit by tactical screens, each reflecting their own brand of doubt. She didn't ask for loyalty, only competence. Hal met her eyes as the teams dispersed. Whatever this test shows, he said quietly, they need to see who you are when it matters. Sarah nodded once. Then let them. Night fell hard. The valley shimmered with artificial lights, targets, tripwires, patrol drones humming low like hornets. Wind carried the metallic tang of rain yet to fall. Sarah crouched with her team at the edge of the training field, scanning the terrain through night optics. Alpha, move on my mark, she whispered. Cade shifted beside her, pulse hammering in his throat. You've done this before, he murmured. Sarah didn't reply. Her focus cut through darkness like a blade. She signaled forward. The squad slipped into motion, shadows moving between broken walls and skeletal towers. Every sound was magnified, the crunch of gravel, the click of a misstep. Sarah adjusted their path, guiding them through blind zones with uncanny precision. At the first checkpoint, a drone swept overhead. Cade froze. Sarah's hand caught his shoulder, pressing him into shadow a second before the light passed. No words, just instinct. He exhaled shakily when it was gone. How? He began. Listen more, she said softly. Speak less. They moved again, crossing a field of scattered debris. Mara spotted a tripwire, raised a hand. Sarah nodded approval, redirecting the path. The team flowed behind her like current, their earlier doubts dissolving into quiet trust. Halfway through, a flare burst overhead, flooding the valley with white light. Voices shouted from hidden speakers, enemy patrol simulation. Chaos erupted. Bravo Squad panicked, scattering across the grid. But Sarah didn't break stride. She signaled calm, motioned for cover, led Alpha through a side corridor that swallowed them in shadow. Minutes later, they breached the objective building, dark, echoing with simulated radio chatter. Cade covered the door while Sarah knelt by the intel console. Her fingers danced across the panel, entering override codes too complex for training manuals. The terminal blinked green. Mara frowned. That wasn't in the assignment. Sarah met her gaze. Neither is survival. They exfiltrated under renewed alarms, moving faster now, a single unit bound by shared adrenaline. At the extraction point, a final challenge waited. A blocked passage, simulated enemy closing in. Cade looked to her. Options? Sarah scanned the terrain. There's always another path. She led them through a collapsed tunnel, crawling beneath twisted rebar, mud slick beneath their hands. Behind them, the simulation's sirens wailed. Ahead, the exit glowed faintly in the dark. They emerged breathless, soaked, but unbroken. When they reached base, dawn was bleeding into the horizon. The debriefing room buzzed with subdued awe. Hal stood at the front, reading reports. Bravo had failed. Delta fractured mid-mission. Only Alpha completed the objective, with record precision. Hal's eyes lifted. Sarah Quinn, step forward. She did. Mud streaked her uniform. Her hands bore cuts from rebar, but her gaze was steady. You led under pressure, adapted beyond protocol, protected your team. Explain. Sarah's answer came quiet. You don't survive chaos by following rules. You survive by reading the silence between them. Hal studied her, then nodded once. Alpha Squad passes. Effective immediately, Quinn is cleared for independent assignment. A murmur swept the room. Admiration, fear, uncertainty all braided together. Sarah didn't react. She only glanced toward the window, where mountains waited like old ghosts. After dismissal, Cade caught up with her outside. The early light painted the yard in gray gold. You saved us back there, he said. You didn't have to. Sarah adjusted her jacket, eyes on the horizon. I did. Because you listened. He hesitated. Where are you going? North. To find whoever sent that message? She turned to him, and for the first time, he saw something almost fragile in her expression. To find what's left of who I used to be. Cade opened his mouth to protest, but the look in her eyes silenced him. She was already gone, in spirit, if not in distance. By midday, Hal found her packing in the equipment bay. Maps, ration packs, a silenced sidearm she hadn't used since the day her unit burned. He watched in silence before speaking. If you step off this base, I can't protect you. Sarah fastened the last strap, shouldered her pack. I'm not asking you to. He stepped closer, voice low. You've built something here. They believe in you. Don't trade it for ghosts. She paused, fingers brushing the insignia on her sleeve. Ghosts are all I've ever followed. Hal exhaled. Then at least don't follow them alone. He handed her a small comm device, unmarked. Encrypted frequency, in case you need a voice. For a moment their eyes held, respect, caution, a quiet understanding between soldiers who carried too much history. Sarah nodded once. Thank you. As she turned to leave, the base sirens pulsed once, brief, low, a heartbeat echoing her own. She stopped, looking back at the rows of recruits training in the yard. Faces turned toward her. Cade, Mara, even Rylan, watching silently as she crossed the threshold. None spoke. None needed to. They knew she wasn't leaving as a recruit. She was walking back into the world that had built her. At the gate, the wind picked up, scattering dust across the road. The mountains loomed ahead, shrouded in cloud. Sarah adjusted her pack, eyes narrowing at the distant ridge where the signal called from. Somewhere beyond that horizon, a truth waited, one that could rewrite everything she believed about the mission that destroyed her. She took her first step north, the gravel crunching beneath her boots like a drumbeat. The past was no longer whispering. It was calling by name. The road north wound through forests that whispered with rain. Mist clung to the pines, heavy and still, as if holding its breath. Sarah Quinn moved through it like a phantom, her boots silent, her senses alive. Each step pulled her deeper into memory. The air tasted the same as that night years ago, the one that turned her into a ghost. The coordinates led to an abandoned outpost carved into the mountain's side. Rusted gates hung crooked, barbed wire sagged, but the place hummed faintly with power, faint signals pulsing through the dark like veins beneath skin. She paused at the threshold, hand brushing the cold metal of the gate. Her field device blinked once, then again. The signal was here. Inside, the halls smelled of dust and old war, gun oil, rust, the faint echo of commands shouted long ago. Lights flickered overhead, revealing walls scarred by time. Sarah's shadow stretched across them like a memory she couldn't erase. A door at the corridor's end glowed faintly. She approached, every instinct awake. The handle resisted, then gave. The room beyond was empty except for a single console and a chair facing away. The console flickered to life. On the screen, lines of code unraveled, forming a message. "Welcome back, Seraph." Her breath caught. That name, one only one man had ever used. The chair turned. He was older now, hair streaked gray, eyes sharper than she remembered. But the voice, when it came, carried the same calm authority that had once carved her into something lethal. "Hello, Sarah." She stared. "Revenant." He gave a small nod. "You got the signal. You're supposed to be dead." He smiled faintly. "Most truths are easier that way." Her pulse quickened. "Operation Echo. What happened?" His gaze drifted past her, to the shadows crawling along the walls. "It wasn't a mission. It was a purge. They sent us to erase a name, but the real target was us. Someone wanted the unit buried, its knowledge, its people, its mark." "You survived," she said. "So did you." His eyes narrowed. "Because you were never supposed to be there." Her jaw tightened. "You sent me. I saved you." He stepped closer, voice softening. "The coordinates were false. I diverted you. By the time you realized, the field was fire." She felt the old anger rise, hot and sharp. "You made me live with it. The ghosts, the lies. It was the only way to keep you alive." He studied her, seeing the scars she carried behind her silence. "And now they're moving again. The ones who buried us. They know you're still out here." Sarah's hand brushed the mark on her shoulder through her uniform, the ink beneath her skin burning cold. "Why now?" "They're rebuilding the program," he said. "New recruits. New names. But they forgot what silence costs. You remember." She took a slow breath, eyes hardening. "Then we stop them." He smiled, a tired, proud curve of lips. "You always did understand." The console beeped, displaying coordinates across the continent, cities, bases, hidden labs, each one pulsing red, a network waking from sleep. Sarah stared at the map, realization settling like lead. "They're already active. Which is why I called you." He met her eyes. "You can do what I can't anymore. I'm done being their weapon. You're not their weapon." His voice was low, steady. "You're the proof they can't control what they created." For a long moment, only the hum of the console filled the room. Sarah looked at him, the man who made her, the ghost who saved her by erasing her, and saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about ownership of the silence that had shaped them both. She stepped forward. "Then I'll need a team." "You already have one," he said. "The recruits, the commander. They saw who you are. That's your strength now." She hesitated. "They're not ready." "They'll learn." He smiled faintly. You did. Outside, wind howled down the corridor, rattling the broken frames. Somewhere deep in the base, power surged, a generator kicking to life. The old facility stirred, as if waking from a long sleep. Sarah turned back to him. What about you? He looked toward the doorway, shadows sliding across his face. I've been a ghost too long. My part's over. She stepped closer. Then why call me? To remind you, he said softly, that ghosts can still choose what haunts them. She wanted to ask more, but the lights flickered violently. The console's map dissolved into static. A low hum built in the walls, rising to a vibration that set her teeth on edge. Revenant's eyes sharpened. They found us. The words barely left his lips before the first explosion rocked the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. The hall lights strobed red, alarms howling awake. They ran through corridors collapsing under the weight of memory. Rooms she'd trained in, halls she'd dreamed through, now burning like the past, demanding tribute. At the outer gate, Revenant stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Smoke curled from a wound at his side. Go, he rasped. Sarah shook her head, pulling him forward. Not this time. He gripped her wrist, eyes fierce. You carry the mark. You carry the truth. Don't waste it trying to save what's already gone. She hesitated, breath ragged, the old training warring with everything human left inside her. Another blast tore through the compound. Flames licked the sky. The past was dying in front of her. She pressed a hand to his shoulder, silent salute, silent goodbye, and ran. Through fire, through fog, through the echo of her own creation burning to ash. By the time she reached the ridge, dawn was bleeding across the horizon. The facility was a smoldering scar below. No movement, no signal. She stood in the wind, smoke curling through her hair, and lifted the field device. Static. Then a single line of text. Truth is never lost, only delayed. Her hands tightened around the device. Behind her, the mountains stood silent, witnesses to everything erased. She turned south, toward the base, toward the recruits who still believed strength meant noise, toward the fight waiting to be finished. The path ahead was unknown, but for the first time, the silence around her didn't feel like exile. It felt like power. Sarah Quinn walked into the rising light, the mark beneath her skin burning steady, no longer a wound, but a promise. The story of the ghost wasn't over. It had just begun.